Oh, that's such a good question. I think, and I'll say it's a constant work in progress. I think especially when a lot of what we're dealing with are heightened emotions around challenging political and social and economic situations. Um, the most effective, I think, I've noticed is just letting people share, um, is finding spaces to have safe conversations and acknowledging that not every space is that safe space, that we're a senior team of 6 here. Our executive director, 2 rabbis, cantor, director of our early childhood program, and director of education. So we're 6 people, and we make up the senior team, and then we have a larger full staff team. And within that senior staff team, we have really different opinions. And so we know that in our senior team meetings, that's the best place to express those differences and talk about it. And again, and also in one-on-one conversations with each other, and acknowledge that we probably won't come out with an agreement, but to figure out what's our best next step forward. And I really believe in transparency and honesty. So I try to bring my full and whole self to those conversations where I can say, I really am struggling with what we're doing here, or I love this. I hope we can go in this direction, and every emotion and experience in between. And it's really not easy. I think, especially when, like our team is, it's multi-generational. It's people with a lot of different experiences, folks who identify as Jewish and folks who don't. And thus we're all coming from really different perspectives, and it's not easy to figure out how we move forward in certain situations. And so I think it's important to, and we're, again, this is always a work in progress, building those individual relationships so that we know that we can assume good intentions and assume that everyone is, at the end of the day, working for the best of the synagogue, and the best of the community with the information we have, um, and knowing that we're going to mess up. I think we all do our best to give each other that grace. And again, it's not perfect, and we certainly mess up. Um, but to try to, listen to one another and ask questions, right? If something hurts or is frustrating, to say, can you tell me more about, why you made that choice or where you're going with that? And then to create an open space to say, here's how that felt when you reacted that way to me. Um, and, I think that is a different way of the workforce. That's a change. And I will name, not everyone, not everybody loves it, but I think that's certainly where I'm coming from, is trying to push for a place of, let's be honest in that space, because there are so many places in which, like, we need to represent the larger whole. And so, make a safe space so that we can feel comfortable, not ignoring our own feelings, but be representative of, more than just ourselves, when we're in other places in the community and beyond the community.
Yeah. In my experience uh, in as a community member in a synagogue, and the ones that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of, um, I've been struck by how in certain Jewish communities, how much dialogue and openness and open discussion and discourse is prioritized. And I want to say, like, there's a Jewish value piece that's tied to that. Can you help me understand
Yeah.
that a little bit better, Julie, please?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was like, this is what I
Thanks.
should talk about. Um, yeah, Judaism from its origin, debate, disagreement, healthy discussion is part of the fabric of the culture. There's a term called machloket l'shem shamayim, debate for the sake of heaven. And what that means
Nice.
is this idea of the debate is part of the discussion, right? The idea of disagreeing is what Judaism is all about. That we look at a text, we look at an issue, we look at how we should run a program, and disagreement is part of the process. That we should, throw out all the different ideas, argue with one another, and then be able to, like, go out to eat, get the proverbial drink together after the conversation. I think it is a big reason why Judaism has succeeded and thrived in the many, many different ways in which it has been a challenging. We are in an era where it is challenging to be Jewish. That isn't new. So I think that's one of the reasons, is that we've been able to have these conversations internally and write down these disagreements. There's a whole set of Jewish books called the Talmud that is literally dozens and dozens of volumes of different ideas about the way to live a Jewish life. And my favorite part about the Talmud, about these texts, is that the minority opinion is preserved. So even though the text
Mm.
will say, in most cases, there's also a term in Judaism called teku. And that if you see that word at the end of a long section of text, it means, yeah, we couldn't come up to an opinion, so moving on. But the idea is you preserve the different opinions, even if it doesn't end with a teku, it ends with and we're going to follow this guy who said, here's how you should, say Shema before you go to bed, one of the Jewish prayers. But the person who said you should do it differently is still in the text. And these are texts that were, codified, written down over, almost 2000 years ago, a little under 2000 years ago. And we've been studying them and learning about them and adding our own thoughts to them since that time. The Torah itself, this is one of my favorite things to teach to kids, is that the Torah itself, which, the world sees as like Judaism's central book, it is, right? All huge, many religions use it. It's just the beginning of our conversation, right? There are thousands and thousands of pages of sacred text that go beyond it, but the Torah is still the central. If you put it in a book, it's about 300 pages. That's not very long. But Jewish people and people of all faiths have been studying and questioning and tearing apart this book for thousands and thousands of years and still seeing it as central and sacred. And so that's like what Judaism is at its core, is looking at this Torah book that we revere, that we respect, that we say, what can it teach us? And saying, I don't like that part, or I love that part. And that's what's Jewish about it, is the questioning, is the discussion. I love watching, teens who are studying for their bar mitzvah have their eyes light up when I say, you don't have to say that you agree with what your Torah portion says, right? That you're going to teach the community about at this sacred moment. You can get up on the bima and say, I really disagree with what happened here. God makes me angry here. Moses makes me angry here. And that's like the most Jewish thing you can do, is say, I wish it said this, or I'm challenged by this and I want the message to be this. And that's as, Jewish as anything. And so in a lot of ways, I think the way we operate in these communities at our best is representing kind of what Judaism is, to everyone, is that we're having these discussions that make it all better because everyone's perspective actually enhances the text, right? If it were just the rabbis and like the rabbis of ancient tradition, which meant a bunch of, white men in black hats who are very, very traditionally observant, if it was only their opinion who talked about text, I think Judaism would have fallen, would have totally disappeared, because it meant that all these other voices wouldn't be listened to. And I think it's an adapting religion. So at our best, we can do that internally. But as I've said now many, many times, much harder said than done. But that's our goal.